He woke up in the middle of the night. Something was wrong. He smelled smoke before he saw the flames. His house was on fire. But the house wasn't the worst thing he'd lost that year. By the time the fire trucks arrived, it was already too late. His home was gone. His company was gone. His marriage was gone. In his wallet sat a single $100 bill. That was everything. After 2 decades of work, $100. 3 years before that night, this man ran $1 million business. He had employees. He had contracts. He had a future that looked completely unbreakable. So how does someone go from running $1 million company to watching their own house burn, with nothing left to lose? And more importantly, could the same thing happen to you? This is the story of one ordinary American. And by the end, you will understand something about financial security that most people never confront until it is far too late. He did not come from money. No inheritance, no trust fund, no safety net. He was the kind of person who built things with his hands before he built anything with his name. He came up through the trades, home construction, remodeling. He understood the work. Early mornings, sawdust, long summer hours on job sites. He also understood business, contracts, bids, customer relationships. By the mid-2000s, he had made the leap most tradesmen never make. He was no longer a laborer. He was a CEO. His home remodeling company was pulling in over $1 million in annual revenue. He had a crew. He had a reputation. He had a life that people in his neighborhood quietly admired. He owned a home. His marriage felt solid. The phone kept ringing with new jobs. In America in 2005, 2006, 2007. If you were in home construction and remodeling, the economy felt invincible. He had no reason to believe anything would ever change. The American housing boom of the mid-2000s was unlike anything the country had seen in generations. Property values climbed every single year. Homeowners borrowed against rising equity. They renovated kitchens. They added bathrooms. They expanded living rooms. They hired companies exactly like his. His calendar stayed full. Revenue grew. He added crew members. He moved from small residential jobs to larger contracts. The business that had started with himself and a truck had grown into something real and lasting. He crossed a threshold most small business owners never reach: $1 million in annual revenue. A real company. Real employees who depended on him. By any reasonable measure, he was a success. Here is the detail that makes this story different from most. He did not drive a Ferrari. He did not take extravagant vacations. He did not gamble or overspend or live beyond his means. He worked. He reinvested. He hired. He built. This was not a story of recklessness. This was a story of an ordinary American who did almost everything right and still lost everything. That distinction matters. Remember it. In September 2008, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, the largest commercial collapse in American history. Credit froze overnight. Banks stopped lending. The engine market, the engine that had powered his entire business, shut down almost immediately. Homeowners who had been planning renovations suddenly couldn't access their equity lines. Banks pulled back on approvals. Projects that had been weeks from starting were canceled by phone calls that lasted less than 2 minutes. His phone, which had rung almost every single day for years, went quiet. At first, it felt temporary. Every business has slow months. He kept his crew on. He kept paying his costs. He told himself the work would return. It always had before. But this time was different. The 2008 recession did not slow the home remodeling industry. It collapsed it. Months passed. Revenue fell toward zero. The clients weren't spending cautiously. They simply stopped spending entirely. He had built something real. But he had built it on a foundation that was, it turned out, connected to something far larger than any single company could survive alone. He began to realize the full weight of what was coming. But by the time it was clear, it was already too late to stop it. He filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. When the process was complete, he walked out with $100 to his name. $100. After years of payroll, contracts, and relentless work, that was the final number. He had gone from CEO of $1 million company to posting paper flyers on telephone poles. He picked up dog waste in his neighborhood. He took any odd job that would cover basic expenses. Whatever work he could find, he found it. The financial strain destroyed his marriage. The silence, the stress, the grinding daily uncertainty. It was more than the relationship could hold. Divorce proceedings moved alongside bankruptcy proceedings. He was losing everything on multiple fronts at the same time. And then, exactly 1 year after the bankruptcy was finalized, he woke in the middle of the night to smoke filling his bedroom. His house was burning. He stood in the street and watched it go. No company, no wife, no house. 1 year, and everything was ash. Most documentaries skip past this moment. They cut to the comeback. But let's stay here for a second, because this is what financial collapse actually looks like at its lowest point. Not a dramatic fall from a penthouse, just a man standing on a cold street at 2 a.m., watching the last physical thing he owned disappear into smoke. No camera crew, no audience, just silence after the sirens leave. That is what rock bottom looks like. Not cinematic, not motivational, just empty. When looking closely at this story, 3 things become clear. The first is concentration risk. Every dollar this household depended on flowed from one industry in one economic cycle. When housing collapsed, everything collapsed with it. There was no fallback, no second stream. One industry, one outcome. The second is the absence of a cash reserve. Most financial advisors recommend 3 to 6 months of operating expenses held in reserve. His company, like the vast majority of small businesses in America, was running lean. When revenue stopped, there was nothing to buy time. The margin between stability and catastrophe was thinner than it looked from the outside. The third lesson is the most uncomfortable of all. He did not do anything reckless. He didn't gamble. He didn't overspend. He worked hard and ran an honest business. He was exposed when an economic wave far bigger than him crashed into everything he had built. That removes the easy comfort of saying, "I would never make that mistake." He didn't make a mistake. He was simply unprepared for a scenario he never thought was possible. The question worth sitting with is this: if your income stopped tomorrow, if your industry went quiet for 12 months, how long could you hold on? What is the actual number of months? Most people do not know. He didn't know either. Until the morning he found out. He did rebuild. Slowly. Differently. He became a real estate investor and eventually built a second career. Teaching others the financial principles the crisis forced him to learn. But the house still burned. The marriage still ended. The $100 was still real. Some losses cannot be undone. They can only be carried forward, as a warning for anyone paying close enough attention to listen. If this story made you think about your own financial exposure, share it with someone who needs to hear it.